If you would ever like to come for coffee, I will introduce you to Studio C. This is my
Oh my gosh.
class.
So fun. That is crazy. I had no idea you were that
Oh,
close.
I know. I saw it on your the stamp or whatever, the postage, and I'm like, what? You're kidding me. Nobody's from that area.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's true.
Nobody's from this area either. Yeah, so lovely to see you.
Oh,
So I was gonna say these books, first of all, before we officially start recording,
yeah.
is so beautiful. It is
Oh,
so beautiful. Thank
thank
you.
you.
You
Thank
gave me
you.
2 copies, and I'm like close to grandmotherly age. So officially, I suppose you are too, sadly.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Weird, right? Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah,
But
because your oldest, how old's your oldest?
22.
Yeah, same. So, yep.
Yeah. Weird. 22, 20, 18, and
Oh,
15. But anyways,
oh, maybe I didn't realize that because my three oldest are 22, 20, and 18. Yeah. Okay.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I didn't know that. And then my youngest is the only one at home, so that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, I
Um,
bet it is.
but
Mhm.
I'm going to do a giveaway in January. So if you want to participate in that, if you want to do
Okay.
any live related things, let me know. Okay.
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 Fun.
Oh, so much fun. Well, thank you for being here. I'm so glad you're here in Studio C. You're welcome to join me for coffee anytime in my real.
We'd love that. My kids would be like, "You're officially next level, mom, if you meet Studio C."
I'm sure you have your own Studio C, except you've turned what is probably a closet into a very lovely recording space.
This is like it is an office now. I used to record in a closet, but I like it because I can have my like lights set up, and then when I need to record, I can just flip them on. I don't have to like set everything up again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For me, I'm trying to avoid showing you all the Christmas gifts on the bottom of my floor. It's not
Yes.
exactly glamorous.
I mean, our cameras are always angled just so, right? Like everything out of view is a mess. Let's be clear.
It really is. It really is. The one thing I've learned after launching 3 kids, and I've got one kiddo at home, is that the cooking, the cleaning, the floor sweeping remains there
It's
with you.
yes, and they're gone, so they're not. You can't delegate it to like you lose your
Oh,
staff.
that's a whole different torture experience. It really is. I'm so glad there's some kids coming back for Christmas.
Yeah, yeah. We have a 10 and we have twin, I keep thinking Claire's 10, an 11-year-old and twin 10 still at home. And when the three oldest left, I mean, they didn't all leave at once, they kind of trickled off to college, but it was very clear, like, oh, these younger kids have never been expected to pull their weight around here, because when you have older kids, it's just really easy to be like, you clean the
Uh,
kitchen and anyway, and you kind of forget that you have to like train them to do all these things.
uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, we're
My
in training mode again, and I'm like, okay, this is how we sweep a floor.
I remember when our oldest had said she moved away and she's like, Zach is like, I don't know, 8 or something. He doesn't know how to do the dishes. I was doing it when I was 2.
She's like, I was cooking dinner when I was 8, right? Yeah.
Legitimately.
Yeah, yeah, same.
She could Christmas shop, the entire grocery Christmas shop at about 13 or 14.
I believe it. That's the first thing I did when my oldest daughter got her license. She came home, she showed me her license, and I handed her the keys and a grocery list. I was like, why don't you put those skills to work? Which I told her,
Okay.
you can go get yourself a latte on the way. And then she was like, this is the best thing ever.
Yeah, exactly. And when they come home from school and they're like, I just want to honor the fact that you keep this pantry full and you can afford to do it.
I remember the first time my oldest daughter goes, do you have any idea how expensive butter is? I was like, I do
That's
know.
funny. We had a group
Honey, you should
text.
ask.
Yeah, exactly. We had a group text on that exact point this year as a family. It's like, how much is butter in Montreal? How much is it here in Toronto or whatever? And anyways, it's too expensive is the answer.
It's too expensive, especially when you want to put a whole stick into your dinner,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well,
which could be a whole nother problem, but
it is such a pleasure to have you here. We're clearly going to have fun here. Uh, would you introduce yourself to those that may not have been introduced to you yet?
yeah. So I'm Sarah Mackenzie. My husband Andrew and I live in the Northwest. We're in Spokane, Washington. We have 6 kids. 3 of them are all launched into college. We homeschooled them all the way through. We have 3 more that are still at home, 10, 10, and 8, 11. And I host the Readaloud Revival podcast and online community that really helps parents fall in love with books with their kids, make connections with their kids through reading aloud, even well beyond the years when their kids can read aloud themselves. And this year, or last year, I should say, we launched a publishing company to start making those read alouds that we really love, those really high quality, beautiful as art,
Mhm.
books to share with kids. And so that's been a new and exciting challenge and a whole new learning curve for me.
It really is beautiful. I'm so looking forward to unpacking your journey or some elements of your journey. But you still have this beautiful Read Aloud Revival podcast, which is just fun to listen to. And then you've got this entire community built around that, and you do so many amazing things
Mhm.
for and with homeschool moms. And you started this podcast. I think you said kind of on a lark. You weren't sure, or maybe it was your husband wasn't sure you could continue it because
Like,
what
what are you gonna I remember him saying, what are you gonna talk about? Like read aloud, do it. Like, what are you gonna say? And I was like, I don't really know. We'll figure it out. But when I kind of brainstormed ideas, and legitimately, when I launched the podcast, I thought it would just be a little short series. Um, I'm always looking for some other project after I have a baby, apparently, because I think I need something besides breastfeeding and diapers, like
yeah,
something else.
yeah.
And so I thought it would be really fun to launch a podcast and just do a few episodes. And of all the things I could think of to talk about that would be the most fun, I thought reading aloud has had the most transformative impact on our homeschool. So I think I'll go with that.
Yeah.
And so I just, before I'd even, oh my goodness, Teresa, before I had even looked up how to start a podcast, this is a little indicative of my personality. I shot an email off to Institute for Excellence in Writing to Andrew Pudawa saying like, hey, would Andrew Pudawa want to talk to me on my podcast about reading aloud? Because his talks on reading aloud had really impacted why we were reading aloud so much. And they wrote back and said, yes. And
Yes.
I thought, I got to figure out how to start a podcast.
Guess what, Sarah? I did
Yeah.
the same thing, but
Oh, seriously.
it was Julie Bogart.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah. Tell me all about it.
Well, I don't know. I'm just like, I wrote this book. I want to communicate this book to the world. And wouldn't it be cool if I could like share it with Julie and anyways and have this
Yeah.
conversation? And it was like blow my mind that they actually said yes. I could
Yeah.
hardly believe.
Yeah. And then you're like, oh, I guess I better. But you know what it does is it isn't just like, oh, it'd be nice to start a podcast. All of a sudden you're like, okay, I guess I'm figuring this out. And
Oh,
most things are figure outable. So you just Google things
even
and ask questions.
podcasting.
And yeah,
Yeah, theoretically calculus too, but I haven't figured
theoretically.
it out yet. But podcasting, I had no idea what I was signing up for in that.
Yeah.
Partly the back end, technology element, but also this
Yeah.
part, I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Meeting people from all over the world and really getting to learn from you and also share in just like the wider homeschool community. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Highly
I agree.
recommended. So the point of this episode is that you should start a podcast and a
Agreed.
publishing company. Ability. All I
The
know
point
is
is dive in before you know how to do it and you'll figure it out along the way, which is actually how most of us parent anyway, right? None of us are really, we don't have all the
absolutely
answers. You just figure things out as you need to. That's kind of how it works. That's life.
that is very much the way it is. So it's such a delight to have you here. Really, as a homeschool mom, eventually, I do know this: you will have an Etsy shop. You're going to have an Etsy shop, or you're going to start some entrepreneurial adventure. I'm sure. I
I've
don't.
heard you say that. I think on Instagram, I heard you say this in a clip where you said, homeschooling moms tend to be entrepreneurial. And you're right. It's like that independent spirit that makes you go, I think we could do this education thing. It's like the same thing that goes, hey, wait, I think we could build this thing that I want in the world, but I can't find anywhere?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. And I know we have different journeys to that, but for me, I saw that, oh, this school thing isn't really working in the way that I thought it would for my
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
And it didn't work for me for various reasons. And it didn't work for my husband despite being valedictorian. So then I'm like, you know what? This is not really what I want for my kids. I want more freedom. And there's so many things that I wanted. But then I start to do it with my kids, and I do it in a very classical, very private school way. So I really just brought my private school in my home. And then I insisted we do it in a certain way, and then realized that's not working. And by year 3 or 4, I'm like, well, we'll just radically unschool. So we shifted for 6 months to that, and then we came back to eclectic, which everyone does after a while. And then it was kind of, we figured out our way. But I'd say that what I really noticed is it's the child in front of you that you learn is the person that you need to engage, and you need to notice, are they being educated? Is it them that I'm raising up to become who they're meant to be? And
Mm,
when you see them starting to live their life on purpose, you're like, me too. I think I should do a few things too.
that's right. Oh, that's so beautifully said. Yes, absolutely.
Words on repeat. I say that all the time.
Mm,
But that is my experience, and that was my journey to that, tapping into creativity and believing that I could do things that were outside the box for myself. I want to hear about your story. You went into podcasting on a lark, and you just went, let's talk about, read-alouds. Let's invite Andrew, which you have actually had many conversations with now.
yeah.
And, and so your journey from there to writing, I mean, I'm guessing writing was preceding all of this, and then you moved into publishing.
Yeah, so actually, about the same time that I launched the podcast, a little before that, I wrote a book and self-published it called Teaching from Rest. And
Yeah.
it started as a series on my blog.
Yeah.
Back then it was 2014. A lot of people were doing like 30 days to fill in the blank, like 30 days to whatever. And then you post on your blog every day. And
Yeah.
I thought, so here's what happened. I'm pregnant with the twins. I have, let's see, how old were they? They would have been something like 12, 10, and 8, and then a 1-year-old, because Claire and the twins are very close in age. Pregnant with the twins, and I'm cleaning out my 8-year-old's closet, and I'm listening to a conference talk. It was all actually about how to teach literature, but at the very end, I was kind of half listening, but like at the very end, the interviewer said, what would you say to if you could only say one thing to a homeschooling mom, what would you say? And the man who was being interviewed said, teach from a state of rest. And
Mm.
I laughed out loud. I was like, this dude has no idea what he's talking about. Like, what? As I'm cleaning out his closet, I'm pregnant, I'm crying, like,
Overwhelming.
um but it's something was like, wait, what would that look like? So I started a blog series called 30 Days of Teaching from Rest. And then I turned it into an ebook that I sold on my website. And it actually did really well. But then the real key turn there was when a small publishing company came to me and said, we'd be interested in publishing that. Do you want to make it like it needs to be a little more robust than just a collection of blog posts? And
Mhm.
so then that book ended up being published. And then I launched the podcast. I do have a little bit of a thing. This is very clear, right? I go a little manic maybe after I have a baby. I'm sure it's tied to like postpartum depression, all that stuff. Because that was a thing as well, where like I do a lot. Like I go into hyper like productivity mode. And so I actually really did write that book and then launch a podcast. And my twins were like 6 months old. That seems a little wow to me now.
I
Uh,
don't know anybody else that would do that, but no more babies for you.
yeah, right. They were the last ones. Can you? Yeah. And they're 10 now. So then, where was I going with that? So then the company that published it said, would you like to come speak? I mean, we think you'd be like good to come speak at the conferences we're speaking at. I laughed on the phone. I'm like, I have 100 children and like half of them aren't walking. And so, but my husband, bless him, was like, why not? I bet you'd be really good at that. You should do that. I can hold things down here. And it wasn't always that easy. Like, I mean, after that, I think sometimes he regretted being like, yeah, you should do that. Just like leaving again. But it was sort of like that. I needed somebody else's vote of confidence, maybe like, hey, you know what? You should actually probably think about that. That's not as ludicrous as you might think it is. So
Yeah.
then I started speaking a bit at homeschooling conferences. And then the podcast, Read Aloud Revival podcast, ended up being, so now at this time, I have a blog where I was mostly doing like some homeschool stuff. I was posting about all kinds of things, gluten-free,
Yeah.
because we're all gluten-free, so that kind of stuff, and like just normal bloggy kind of stuff. And then I had just done this book, right? And then was starting to speak a little bit and this podcast, but the podcast is the thing that was getting the most traction. And it was also the thing I was having the most fun with because it
Mhm.
was talking about books, which is my
Channel.
favorite.
Yeah.
I'm an extrovert and I'm home all day with my children. So it was like, I get to do this like I'm doing with you right now.
Yeah.
And I loved it. And so at about that time, I also kind of reached something of a breaking point where it was like I realized, that phrase, like their eyes were too big for their
Yeah.
stomach. Is that what we say? Yeah, but like if you put too much food on your plate. So that's how I am with life. Like
Yeah.
my eyes are too big for my energy or something.
Uh-huh.
And I read the book Essentialism by Greg McEwen.
Yes. It's
And I
on
was,
my homeschool mama reading list.
it's so good, isn't it? So good.
So good. Yeah.
There's so many applications for homeschooling too. And I really felt like, oh, I'm doing too many things. So I ended up deciding to shut down my blog. I'd actually, oh, I forgot. I had started a whole nother website with a couple of friends too at the time called Scholé Sisters, which is still going, but I stepped away from it. So I'd started that, pulled some friends in to do it with me. Then I just gave it to them, was like, you know what, I have to do less. So, and I decided I'm just going to do the podcast, not because it really made the most sense, is definitely not what like most people who had, if they had heard of me at all at that time, it was from Teaching from Rest. It was not for the podcast. But I was like, but this is where I'm finding the most joy. So I think I'm going to stick with it. And then I kind of put all my eggs in that basket. And then I ended up writing several years later, I ended up writing a book about reading aloud called The Readaloud Family that
Yeah.
got published by Zondervan. And now, I mean, that's what I do. I talk about read aloud. Reading aloud is the thing that I talk about pretty
Wow.
much everywhere. Yeah.
So beautiful. So Enneagram 3.
I am an Enneagram 7.
Oh, well, of course you are. You're so much fun. Of course you are.
But it is, I have a lot of, I mean, I remember the first time I did the Enneagram, I was like, I mean, there's a lot of 3. I think it's, I think I have, I mean, I think what some of the things that 3s and 7s have in common are like that energy and like, I do, I don't know if you do Strengths Finder. Have you done
Yep,
anything with
I've done
Strengths
that
Finder?
too. Yeah, it's been a
Okay,
while.
so one of my top strengths, my top strengths are like woo and positivity. So those all match the 7, but also focus is really high up there. And I think so a lot of times, I've been asked before, like, are you an Enneagram 3? But I think it might have more to do with like motivation. Like
Yeah.
I'm not that motivated to do things when they're not fun.
Okay, well, cha-ching, you're a 7. I have a daughter who's a 7.
Okay.
Yeah,
What are
yeah,
you? Are you a 3?
yes. Yeah, no, I'm a 2 wing 3. Yeah,
Oh, you're a 2 wing 3. Okay, yes. And I think I'm a 7 wing 8.
yeah.
And I think that wing 8 is what
Make
also looks
stuff
like a 3.
happen. Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yes.
absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, beautiful.
Sometimes I'll like it'll get a little ahead of me. And I think that's like when I read Essentialism, I like to think of it as like your 8 is showing, like my 8 is showing, like a little petticoat, you know? Like, oh, we can tell that Sarah's 8's gotten a little bit away from her.
What have you loved about that book? Like, what did you really hear from Essentialism?
The image that sticks out to me still, all these years later, I've read it probably 5 times, which is kind of ironic for a book called Essentialism, like do less. And I'm like reading it again and again and again. I have so many notes in the margins. It's
Yeah,
that image of the circle with 10 like arrows that are all maybe an inch out. You know what I'm talking about? Around it, saying like this is you putting energy into 10 things. And
yeah,
then there was another circle next to it, and it had one arrow that was the length of all 10 of these arrows put together.
yeah,
And I was like, I mean, even that image, like I can feel in my body, like, oh, this this one over here that's like all this energy in so many ways is oftentimes I feel like what homeschooling and motherhood requires, because you are in charge of doing so many different things.
yeah,
But I think I was trying to be awesome at all of them.
yeah,
And I was just, I think part of what essentialism has helped me do is say like, okay, I'm actually not awesome at like great homemade meals, but I'm pretty awesome at read alouds and being just okay with that. Like knowing there's always a trade-off.
hmm. Yeah, I think we had that conversation in our first episode
We did.
about, I asked you about balance. Because
Oh,
everybody is always like, well, how do you balance something? I'm like, why are we talking about balance as a mother? It does not apply.
yeah.
It does
And
not
it's
apply.
not a static thing.
It
It
is never
means,
static.
yeah. Misty Winkler will talk about balance. I don't know. I don't remember if we talked about this when I was on last. As it like when you're balancing on a bike, it's not that you balance and you're there. The actual act of balancing is constantly making shifts.
Yeah.
And so if we're in balance as mothers, I mean, again, I'm with you. I don't really like the word. It's got too much wrapped in it that doesn't make sense. But if we are going to think about the word balance, then we should be thinking of it as the constant adjustments that we have to be making, not as a state of peace or calm. That's not what it is.
That is really good. You're becoming my reference point every time I speak to balance, by the way, because
Oh,
what you said was something that I have said many times after it, but it's something I know to be true in my practice in mindfulness is being present. The key is to be present wherever you are.
yeah.
That's all. That's all, folks, which means you're not God. You can't be everywhere all at once. Not even if you have two kids, not even if you have a business and
That's
you're
right.
homeschooling, like it doesn't work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Um, I also wonder, do you, so I'm wondering, especially with like are you a futuristic person? Like is future, like, are you always living in the future? You know, when we're talking about being
Um,
present,
I can
or
be
like,
very present. I'm more future. Yeah, I am more
okay.
future. Yeah.
That's my hiccup. And actually my oldest daughter said to me recently, I think she said it on my podcast actually, when I was interviewing her, something about be where your feet are. And there's like a million different ways to
Yeah,
say
I
be
remember that.
present. But I was like, something about that was like, oh, it puts me instantly in this actual physical concrete space.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually, it's interesting to me, like, there are certain things that I've learned over the course of the last 20 years, certain things that we would call self-compassion or mindfulness techniques or something to learn how to be present, and
Okay.
when I'm in coaching with people, sometimes I can see that they're just busy in their heads,
Mm.
and they're trying to rationalize things, they're explaining things, they're sharing stories, they're whatever, and then all I have to do is say, "Okay, will you just pause for a moment with me? Put your hand on your heart and just notice, how's your heart beating? How are you feeling right now?"
Mm.
And then just breathe slowly and notice what's going on in your body. And by the mere act of doing that, we are putting ourselves into the present and feeling
Yeah.
all of it. And so it's not my instinct to do that. That's definitely something that I had to learn along the way and get comfortable with because it wasn't a practice I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
Um, but also, it's helped me to get out of my head so that I am actually with
Yes.
here.
For years I had on a little whiteboard in my bedroom, I had written, remember you have a body. And
Yes,
my
exactly.
daughter was probably 8 at the time. This is my now 11-year-old. She was like, "What does that mean? Like, do you forget you have a body?" Because of course a kid doesn't forget they have a body, you know? But like not unless they're angry or like really emotional, and then they absolutely forget they have a body, right? Well, I felt like I was in a constant state of forgetting. Like I'm so in my head, it's like I forget, like, oh yeah, you have this body that number one you have to take care of. So like when you're
Ah,
feeling like stressed, you need to go for a walk. Like
ah,
you have a body. Take
uh-huh.
care of it. And also, your body is in a place which is right here and right now. It's a tricky thing for a lot of us. I think that being
Oh, yeah.
present
I think
is difficult, but
it is.
it's one of my things for the next year is I
Mm,
really want to get better at being where my feet are.
yeah, I really like that phrase. That's a beautiful phrase, and it's a powerful technique to obviously deal with your big emotions because we also as moms are having these huge emotions in
Yeah.
response to our kids,
Yeah.
and also there's just so much energy, and even I hear that you're extroverted. I can feel that you're extroverted, and like you're a seven. So are you allowed to be a seven and an introvert? Is that a
I
thing?
don't know if that's possible.
I
I
don't
don't
think
think it's
that's
probably
possible.
possible. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's somebody out there. Tell me, like, send me an email. Tell me about what
Yeah,
it's like.
yeah, I want to hear too because I have yet to meet that person. But as an introvert, and I also meet a lot of people that define themselves as highly sensitive people,
Yeah.
that they are also choosing to homeschool, and that right there is a lot. And so
Yep.
we really do need to, even though it is very difficult to do, we need to come away and either practice these little mindful moments or literally leave the house, go somewhere to come away. I don't, did you have that experience at all as a seven, as an introvert?
Yes, because I think socializing with my kids didn't do it for me. So like also felt spent because and
Mhm.
then like my husband would come home and he still makes jokes about this about how for years and years I would be like, "Okay, so what happened at the office?" and he'd be telling me about some conversation and I'm like, "No, no, verbatim." Like I wanted to be
Yeah,
there so badly.
exactly.
Like
I've said that too. I'm like, listen, I haven't been with you. And he's like, I've been in a merge all day and I'm dealing with some really high intensity mental health cases. And I would like to leave it there. But I'm like, but I'm bored. So
yeah,
just give me the
but
stuff.
I need the mental stimulation of a conversation with you, an adult. Yeah. And he would say like a lot of times he would leave for work and I would be standing at the door, like, don't leave me here. So I mean, but I can totally see like so many of my introvert friends who say being home with your kids all day is so taxing on yourself when you are an introvert. And I also think it's actually taxing on yourself as an extrovert too, especially if, because I don't know if socializing with your 5 and 3 and 1-year-old really fills your extrovert bucket. It
Ah,
didn't fill mine.
okay.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes. As much
Yes.
as we love them, so many amazing memories. The
Mm.
conversation is not quite the same.
No. And I also wonder if that plays into, you know, how like it occurs to me that parenting and, you know, all the different stages of parenting, some seem easier or harder for different people. You know, I had a much harder time with babies than I did with teens. Like that
Yeah.
I was so worried about teens because everyone talks about teens and I was like, like, oh, my teens were just my oldest three. I mean, yes, there it comes with its own challenges. There are very other challenges. They all felt more manageable to me than like the toddler throwing themselves on the floor. And I'm like, what do I do with you?
Well,
But
because
I know I have
figure it out
friends
then,
who would say
maybe.
the
Yeah.
opposite, who would say like, oh, those are little problems. They would say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. I never understood. Like I still don't. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Those
Yeah.
little problems are really loud.
I think it depends on the child. That's
That's a
my,
good point.
very much the personality. Someone told me last weekend that they remember me speaking to her or she remembers me speaking to her when she had her third, that was a baby. And she said, you had shared whatever your labor story is and your first early days with your child,
Yeah.
that's your child. And I'm like, yep, that's my experience.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about babies. Maybe it's just a sign that we just need to get right back in there. You need to create something big, or how could you create something bigger than what you've created? It's pretty impressive. You're more than an Etsy shop. So tell me all about what you've been doing, because this book, While Everyone's Sleeping, is, I mean, it really is beautiful as a read aloud, something that you should have on your bookshelf, both in the illustrations by Gabrielle Grimard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Grimard. Yep. Mhm.
Grimard, who is in Quebec, where one of my girls is, my Enneagram 7.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and also the writing is really beautiful, and that's yours.
So, I've tried to write picture books back when my oldest, who's now 22, was a baby. So like, and I still have them and they're terrible. They're so bad. But I really like was in like I wanted to do this. And I think it's because I would sit there and I would read like Mama, Do You Love Me? Do you know that board? It was like a board book I had. And it's about an Inuit mother and child, and it's like,
Oh,
Mama, do you
yeah.
love me? And it kind of is like, I love you more than the mucklucks, like, and I love
Oh,
you more than the salmon in the sea, that kind of thing.
yes.
And I'm messing it up. It's much more beautifully written than that. But I would love reading her that. And then I would read another one and be like, so I got really curious about like, what is the difference? And then I tried to write them. And so I've wanted to write them for a long time. I think in some ways, starting and running the Read Aloud Revival has almost made it a little bit, it's made it it's kind of a double-edged thing. And in some ways, it's made it easier because I get to have all these great conversations with my favorite authors, and so that's awesome. And
Yeah.
then I'm also immersing myself in the best children's books, and so then whatever you write after that is never never gonna match the quality of what you know is good. Like I feel like we're so tuned in at Read Aloud Revival to constantly looking for the best books, so then it's like the imposter syndrome is really strong.
Mm.
But
Oh,
with
can I tell you, you don't need to be? For
yeah,
real.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's
Um,
really written.
one thing I love about picture book writing that is not true with at least the two adult books that I've written, the nonfiction books, is that, it's only 300 words or something. And so, but every sentence and every word in a picture book matters. So what happens is you get to take this, I mean, that While Everyone is Sleeping probably went through something like 25 or 35 drafts. I don't have them all, but like multiple critique partners. It was about a baby and a sister at the beginning. It wasn't even about a shrew, which is now it's about a shrew in a moonlit garden. Like it went through so many iterations. And one of the things I've discovered over time is that I really like taking something and then like making it better, making it better, making it better. Now, at Read Aloud Revival, we've sort of done that in RAR Premium because I launched RAR Premium in 2015, I think. So it's that membership site has been running for 8 years and I haven't launched anything else until this publishing company. I haven't launched anything else. But we just take it and we just like fine tune it, make it better, make it better. And I
Yeah.
realized, oh, that's what I like to do rather than like coming up with something brand new. In
Mhm.
picture book writing, I think because the story is so short, you get to take it and then just like, it's like a rock tumbler almost, like, and so that's been really fun to discover. But one of the pieces about publishing them ourselves, and I'll rewind a little bit and say, I actually got an agent who's taught me to Paula's agent. Actually, he introduced me to his agent back when he was alive. And that agent was taking my manuscripts While Everyone is Sleeping, A Little More Beautiful, and a few others that we have coming out in the next couple years,
Oh, exciting.
to these New York publishers. And I was trying to break in that way. And it didn't, we would get really far. Like we would get to the sales meeting with the publisher or whatever, and then it would just drop. Um, that was fine. But I mean, at the time I was really frustrated. And now one of the questions that I heard on a podcast back then, and I don't remember which podcast or who said it, but they said, like when you encounter obstacles or roadblocks in your goal, and my goal at the time was to get published as a picture book author,
Yeah.
you've got to ask yourself, what does this make possible? And that
Mm,
sounds really trite, but now when I think back on like actually all those, if I hadn't been rejected for all of those, I never would have been like, okay, you know what? I think we're going to try and do this ourselves. And
yeah.
now at Waxwing, we are publishing my picture books, but we're actually publishing other works. So we have
Oh,
3 books a
beautiful.
year coming out all the way through 2027.
Wow.
Lots of them, different illustrators for all of them, different authors for several of them. Many of the books I don't have anything to do with the author or illustration. We're just publishing them. It's um possible only because of the thing that I thought was keeping me back, you know?
That is amazing. That really is amazing. Beautiful story. And that just so speaks to the you assume that something is a roadblock and actually it's a way of directing you into the better way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I find it's a really helpful question. It's frustrating. Like you'll ask it to yourself, like, okay, this bad thing just happened. What does it make possible? And then you'll be like, shut up, self. Like, come on, give me a break. So you do kind of feel like that. But if
Yeah,
you just sit with it for a minute and you're like, well, maybe just understand something is going to be possible here. What could it make possible? It's
that's
been a really powerful tool for me.
yeah, that really is beautiful. I mean, a publishing company, like that's huge. And also your genre that you chose, that is what I understand, unless you're doing a foreign language, the most difficult book to read or to write is a children's book because you have to be, I mean, obviously you've chosen very specific words, but to create an entire plot with very few words, that's
Yeah.
challenging. Yeah.
It is, it's a fun challenge. I was talking with Jeannie Birdsall, who's the author of the Penderwicks, and
Yes.
uh
Beautiful.
we were talking about how a lot of times in the publishing world we kind of expect like a picture book author to also write middle grade novels, children's novels, and the other way around. And a lot of them do, but she said, and she did. Jeannie has picture books and novels. She's a much better novel writer than a picture book writer. I was telling her I've written a novel and it's terrible. And I was like, I'm not really sure what to think about that. Like I would like to be a novelist, but it's just not, I'm working at it. I've taken classes, I've written whole novels. It's just, and she said, it just feels like one of them always comes easier. Like for her, a novel is easier than a picture
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can work on it, but, or you could just be like, oh, I'm just going to do this fun one that I'm really enjoying. But isn't it funny how, like, when something is a little easier or a little more enjoyable for you, it's like, does it really count? Even if it's like not the more easier, enjoyable person for somebody else, you know, based on their personality and
You,
temperaments and
you actually take
Enneagram.
it for granted. Like for me, I've missed this entire element of how to manage your time, this discussion with other moms, or about how to just decide what's the most important or most essential things
Yeah.
in your life. And I'm like, well, this kind of comes naturally to me, so I don't think to teach it anymore because it's so
Yes.
natural. And
Yes.
yet, one of the most common conversation points I'm asked about. But when it comes to writing, I have always been a journaler, and I have written my memoir twice. And then I tried to get into fiction because I thought that was the right way to go. So I was working with Gail Anderson Dargat's an Giller Award honor, no, a Giller Award winner in
Okay.
Canada. And she, The Cure for Death by Lightning and various, The Secret of Bees, The Secret Life
Oh,
of
yeah.
Bees, really big author.
Yeah.
And I could just not tap in to an authentic expression of fiction writing because I always
Yeah.
wanted to turn it into something nonfiction. So I really do identify with that. Like there's a
Yes.
certain genre that's yours,
Yes.
and then there's other stuff that's not so much. I'm sure it can be developed, but
I will tell you some nonfiction, like collections of essays. What's the one I just Bomb Shelter? Have you read that?
no.
Hang on, I'm gonna look up her name really quick because I mean, when I read this book, I was like, oh, see, like this makes me want to write. Hold on, bomb shelter. You can't just look up bomb shelter on Google, it'll give you a different answer. Okay, Mary Laura Philpott. And oh, I bet you would really enjoy this one because she talks a lot about her kids growing up and going off to college.
Ah,
um in it, but it's a collection of essays. And I mean, when I read it this last year, I was like, this is the kind of book where I'm like, oh, this makes me want to write and I want to be able to write like this. It's so like that kind of thing where you finish a chapter, which is a complete essay basically. And like I'd go back and be like, okay, now how did she do that? That was amazing.
So many authors that I'm like that. And then, but for me, I've noticed there's a direct tie between me fully expressing myself genuinely on paper, and it has to be whatever that is. Even though, of course, I'm going to learn certain communication skills over the course of time, and Grammarly will teach me much as well.
Yes,
But
same.
in the meantime, whatever I'm putting on paper has to be a reflection of what's truly here in my heart
Yeah.
and what is truly me. And I've learned that the more that I develop that, then I can write, you know, I can really own who I am. And I also can help other people to really own who they are.
Yeah.
Not coincidentally, that's what I often say is I help homeschool moms show up on purpose, authentically, confidently, and purposefully.
Mm.
And it's a direct tie to who I am. So I feel until, I don't know, I don't think there's an until. I just have to write who I am on paper and
Yeah.
just own that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And the impact that it has on other people is so outsized compared to your own effort when
Yes.
you're working in that space of like just being who you are and showing up in your strong areas and like letting yourself be exactly like you said, like the thing, it's that curse of knowledge, I think is what they call it, right? When you know something so well, like you were talking about time management, that like you don't even think you have anything to share, but then somebody else is like, wait, tell me everything you know. I feel that way about so many things with things that are not my strength areas, and yet at the same time I discount it
Yeah.
in my own knowledge. And then when someone else tells me the impact that something I've written or whatever has on their life, you're like, okay, that was not just me. There's like an outsized
Absolutely. Yeah.
gift that happens there. Yeah.
All the time, all the time. But what I've noticed is me being fully who I am and available to the world to be fully who I am means that I'm inviting other people to do that. And
Yeah.
they're not going to be me. They're not going to reflect back who I am, but they're going to be fully them. And that I'm like, bring it. I will
That's
stand
cool.
as a lightning rod for that one.
That's cool.
Like we
Yeah.
just have to break out in the song "This Is Me" right now.
Yeah.
I love this song by The Greatest Showman. I've even sung it on this podcast, which I shouldn't have done, but I did. And I'm like, that song is just like whoever you are, that's who you should be, and you got to allow it to express itself. So
Yeah.
this is you. This you? I'm sure there's many iterations of who
There's
you.
many. I mean, here's the fun thing about picture books too. I realized so many of my picture books are actually kind of solemn and serious. They have like a serious undertone. At one point, my agent, when I was submitting stuff to him, he's like, "Do you write anything about other than death?" I mean, like that's how many picture books I was. I'm like, "Oh, clearly I'm working through some stuff over here," and I was working through some grief things. But I was like, "Oh, how interesting!" Because if you meet me in person, you would never somber, solemn, obsessed with death are not things that anyone would use to describe me. So
No.
one of the fun things is because we have those two picture books. Next year we have two more coming out that I've written. We have three more coming out, but only two of those I've written. They're both picture books. One is a picture book biography about Barbara Cooney, who is the author illustrator of like she's the illustrator of the Oxcart Man, the author illustrator of Miss Rumphius and Chanticleer and the Fox and so many books. So it's a picture book biography about her. And
Beautiful.
then that was like a really fun, completely different experience because it was so heavily researched.
Yeah.
And then the other book that's coming out that I wrote next year, it's not coming out till fall, is easily the most fun I've ever had writing. And it's a funny story about a duck and a bunny or a hare that are friends. And it is like, that to me feels like, okay, that feels more like me, but they actually all are me. And it kind of reminds me that like, we're all so multifaceted. So we have a little more beautiful that is one kind of book while everyone is sleeping is a different kind of book, and for Cuz Barbara and then this dear duck, and they all feel very much like me, but they're all like the different faces maybe
Yeah.
of me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Just like I am a certain person when I'm with my Enneagram 7 child, which of course has a name also beside the Enneagram number, and also my 8 and my 1 and my 9, sorry.
Yes,
I know what my kids are. I
I
think I
know. Yeah. That's so interesting. So I have a 9, an 8, and he and I have so much fun together, like
Oh yeah.
debating because I've got an 8 wing, right?
Mhm.
And so my 9 will be like, "Can you guys stop arguing?" And we're like, "Oh, we're not arguing. We're having a great time in here."
I think I know
We're
my
debating. That
I
was fun.
remember off the top of my head, I remember the Enneagram types faster than their ages.
That is so funny. Oh my gosh. Yes. And well, the Enneagram doesn't really change, but their ages change constantly.
Exactly.
I haven't pegged my younger three yet. They're a little young. So I've
Yeah,
got some ideas about what they are. And that, what did I say? I said a 9, an 8, and a 5. Yeah, that's really interesting. So
you're
that's
a
fun.
researcher. Yeah.
Yeah. What's
Well,
your husband?
he's a one. So it's
Okay.
actually interesting to me to watch my husband and my son are theoretically the same Enneagram type. And I'm like, is that, or is that like a reflection? But anyways, my 15-year-old son is like, I'm a one wing two. And then he refers to things like, well, but this is the right way to do it. And I'm like, okay, forgot it. You're a one.
Yeah.
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 He was actually homesick yesterday, and he
Oh,
asked me, my 15-year-old is like, would you consider reading to me today? I have such a busy week this week. And I'm like, oh, I have so many things to do, but heck yeah. I'm like, I will stop everything
when your
to
15-year-old son asks you to read to him. Yeah.
read.
Yeah.
So,
Good
yeah.
call.
I mean, I'm like, I miss this. I really miss
Yeah.
this. I do.
Yeah.
So are you reading in your RAR premium?
Yeah. Okay, so right now, oh my goodness, we just finished. So this isn't what we read for RR Premium. I just finished this book with my three younger kids. It's called The Dragon and the Stone. It's a
Mm.
new fantasy, new as in I think it came out, it might have been this year, it might have been last year. It's a trilogy, it's a fantasy trilogy that I think could be like a really good fit for kids who loved the Green Ember or the Wingfeather Saga. So that
Uh-huh.
one was a really fun. I got to do lots of fun voices, which I really like to do.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
My husband does read aloud to the kids too. He likes fewer voices, but he likes long series. I am not a fan of a long series because I get really bored. So like after I've finished reading one book, I'm like, and you can read the rest of the series on your own now. But I just started him off because he's never read the Chronicles of Narnia. So I was like, you should read those. The kids have all listened to them. It doesn't matter. You can read those a million times and love them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow. Beautiful. So, but
And
you're
then
still,
myself, for my own fun, I just started listening to Mr. Dickens and His Carol
Hmm.
by Samantha Silva. It's like a um it's historical fiction, but it's based on the true story of Charles Dickens writing A Christmas Carol. And I think it might be the basis of the movie The Man Who Invented Christmas, which is my favorite Christmas movie.
Oh,
But it's like a fictionalized account. I don't know. It's so good. It's like one of those audiobooks that like it's read in a British accent. And a
that's
man with, but yeah, I mean, hello.
so easy for those British folk.
I know.
Yeah, I love that. That is hilarious. So for moms who are listening to us and saying, I am homeschooling my kids, I can't even fathom writing a book, let alone a publishing company, but or tapping into all those little elements of creativity, even creating space to be creative. What would you say to them in order to move into the direction of who they really are and creating time for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's really helpful to me is to think of when I'm thinking about like what I want to do with one thing is I always knew I wanted to have things that I cultivated outside of my children. Like I want, obviously, we're pouring into our children. That's like
Mhm.
the most important thing to me. And also, I wanted to especially give a model to my girls, especially, that like, is this the kind of life I want you to live when you're older? Yes. And I also, that means that I need to have like other wide interests and things that I'm doing. But like when I'm thinking about what those are, it's like, what makes me feel the most like myself? And that's
Mhm.
going to be really different depending on your Enneagram type and your personality and your interests and your history and all the different things that make so whatever makes me feel like myself, I'll tell you,
Mhm.
I was just saying this to a friend the other day. If you asked me to like what is like a dream day for you, I can remember a day that it was a few years ago. I was speaking at a conference in Florida. I got done at 3, and so I was like, I'm in Orlando. Like there's one thing I want to do when I'm in Orlando because I love roller coasters and I love theme parks. And I know like half of you watching this at least are like, "Oh my gosh." No, no. I took myself by myself in an Uber to Disney World, to Animal Kingdom, and rode the roller coaster, the big one there that goes backwards,
Yeah.
like down the bay. Yeah. 6 times in a row. I went there and did the roller coaster and I was by myself. Remember, I didn't have my children with me. So I had my Kindle. So as I'm in line, I'm reading and then going on roller coasters. And I'm like, this is heaven. And I cannot tell you how many friends have looked at me like that sounds like the worst possible day. And I
Now
think
you
that's
know you're a
great.
7, 100% 7.
Yeah, yeah.
You know the
I
theme
think
park that's in Idaho that's not too far away from you? I should totally know.
Silverwood.
Silverwood. I have not been on any of those roller
They're
coasters.
pretty intense too. Those some of those roller coasters are like, whoo, yeah, I do them. Of
Yeah,
course I do them all, but
of course you love it. I
I
love that.
do. But like one of the things that makes it really like I was at that conference with other speakers and friends that I knew. Nobody, when I said, "You want to go to Disney World with me tonight?" They were like, "Why on earth would I want to do that when I'm not taking my children?" Like, no. And I love that we're all so different. So I think it's sort of like figure out how you feel the most. I also feel the most like myself when I'm watching Poldark on my couch in the evening or when I'm reading in a bath. So like we're not like just one kind. I am a 7 and so and I'm an extrovert, but I need the bath reading time as much as I need the roller coasters or this social time. And I think it's just sort of honoring like what makes you feel most like yourself. There's no right or wrong answer. So while starting a publishing company might look really splashy, it does make me feel like myself. And but it's no better or worse than knitting a scarf. Like I actually can't. Actually don't know how to do that. You
Yeah.
know. But like, I don't know. I just feel like honoring really like how you were made and who you are in the world, and not making yourself assign like a value on whether this is as good or not as good as someone else's thing. It's like there's no value there. It's just there's no number. You don't assign a metric to it. It's just sort of like, isn't it great that our world is full of people who are all being themselves in a completely different way?
Yeah, and we have the opportunity as homeschool moms, we have so much freedom and opportunity to create opportunities for our kids to fully embrace that. And
Yes.
we it's harder to see for ourselves because we are so occupied, but we do have the opportunity for ourselves. We need to start small and it will continue to grow over the course of our child's, childhood. But
Yeah.
they have this opportunity. And if the whole world could have that kind of freedom and just to have encouragement to fully embrace who they are and keep being fed the things that matter so that they can build into the person they're supposed to be, that to me would be remarkable that everyone did whatever they did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful.
absolutely.
Yeah,
What
such a
like a model too, because I think
yeah,
sometimes we feel guilty about like the things we do that aren't for our children, but it's actually a really my oldest daughter has actually thanked me. She's actually taken and now she's 22. She has different language for it than she did when she was 12. Um, where she has said, like, watching you have something like a creative goal and then going for it has made it possible for her to go like, you know what? I actually want a family and I want this big creative life. And I can see a model for that. And that's really, so it's not, I mean, it's actually worth it. Even if you're not doing a model for your children, it's just like, if you need a little extra
right. But it
something to be,
absolutely is as a model. Yeah, I actually just turned 50. And so no new baby for me. But that, my daughter, one of my girls sent me 50 things I love about you. And that is one thing that she said to me. And I was like, oh my
yeah.
goodness, like 50
What a
really lovely.
great gift. Oh my gosh. 50 things I love about you.
Well, she's an Enneagram 7. So
Like, what a great idea.
publishing company next.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
Such a pleasure chatting with you. So much fun. Thank you
Thank
for
you so much. Thank